every time I see him, I don't know what to say. It's like I open my mouth, my brains fall out. He is a cornerstone for pretty much any hardcore jazz pianist that I ever encountered. He always swung. Whenever we played, he was into the swinging mode by the first 8 bars. There was no question about it. He always had a groove going, and I think, for me, that is his legacy.
He has a touch of the piano that is unique. If you were in the classical world, you would compare him to Vladimir Horowitz, and you would say that it's incredible how he with one note can make something sing.
His name is spoken in the same breath as Nat King Cole, Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald, and Count Basie. Oscar Emmanuel Peterson is the last great pianist from jazz's golden age. An international superstar, he is regarded by his peers and adoring fans as a cat who can really swing.
I love what I do. I love music, I love jazz. And it would have to be something awfully immense to offset that in any way for me. But music is it for me. That's where it's at for me.
Perfectionist, practical joker, and one of the all-time great exponents of jazz, Oscar Peterson is unlike any music legend that ever was or ever will be. His utter dedication to music for the past 7 decades has taken him to the pinnacle of international success and to the depths of emotional despair.
I think if you're a genius and maybe have really a profound depth of talent in all areas, maybe there's a tendency to expect the rest of the world to be like that, and it ain't. Otherwise we wouldn't have that word genius.
With more than 400 albums and thousands of performances throughout the world, Oscar shows no signs of giving up the road, still demanding no less than perfection from himself at the age of 78. Oscar Peterson was born on August the 15th, 1925, in a small limestone house in Saint-Henri, the hub of Montreal's black community. He was the 4th of 5 children.
We always got along well, but as youngsters growing up, well, we weren't allowed to be hanging out in the streets playing, so we had to find entertainment at home.
Oscar's father, Daniel Peterson, taught himself to play the organ while serving aboard a merchant ship in the early 1900s. Convinced that music was his children's only escape from poverty, Daniel bought the family a piano that he could not afford. On a railway porter's salary, he had to sacrifice necessities like food and clothing.
I think my dad one day at the dinner table discovered that I had some kind of pitch recognition due to clicking coffee cups and glasses, you know, and went to the piano and checked it. And I said, I think that's an A or an E or an F sharp or something. And he found out that way. I didn't even know what they were talking about, really.
Even though his early life was filled with music and the strict Christian values of his West Indian parents, young Oscar still found time for having fun, often at the expense of others.
One time, the boy next door, Oscar put a tub of water on the door. Then he said he invited him over. Of course, Dad was out of town. And when he came over, Oscar opened the door, and of course the water.
I mean, he did those sort of things.
He has never outgrown his boyish sense of humor and love of practical jokes, an endearing quality that would later reduce fellow musicians and friends to tears of laughter. But there was also a serious side to young Oscar, and a drive for perfection, molded by his overbearing father.
He was more than firm. I'll put it honestly now. He was more than firm. He was obsessed at one point, I thought, with somebody in the family coming up with some musical output.
So when he was out of town, we had very good times. When he was in town, it was more or less piano and schoolwork.
In the 1930s, blacks in Canada experienced a hushed form of oppression. For the Petersons, music was an escape from dead-end jobs on the railroad and a shot at a better life. They formed a family band, entertaining at church and social events.
Not to be conceited, but we were actually better than the average kids. So, and of course we had the golden star ahead of us, Oscar, so everything was, the Petersons are going to play, the Petersons are going to play, and so we stayed that way.
My brother Fred, who died at 16, had a great influence. I think he was the biggest influence. Because I think, and I said this to various well-known players in the jazz world, especially Art Tatum, Teddy Wilson, pianists like that, that if he were alive and playing today, I don't think I'd be playing, because he played so well. And I probably would have been his manager. And I mean that, because Fred could play.
During one session, Oscar was told to try the trumpet instead of the piano. He was thrilled with the instrument, something he never felt, plunking away on the keyboard. But tuberculosis, the great epidemic killer of the 1930s, devastated the Peterson family. His brother Fred died. Oscar, just 7, and sister Daisy fought for their lives.
I spent a year and a month in the Children's Memorial Hospital there. And when I came home, the doctor said, I don't want him playing any wind instruments. It's not good for his lungs. So I went back to piano.
Peterson's incredible technique was nurtured at an early age by 2 influential piano teachers, jazz pianist Lou Hooper and classical virtuoso Paul DeMarchi.
And Lou, or Mr. Hooper as I called him then, used to work at music. He was a player in a group. And he got to the point with me where I was busy listening to records and trying to hone whatever skills I had at the time. And I was doing fairly well with that, because I remember he went to my dad one day and said, I think I've served up my usefulness there. You know, he's out of my hands.
I taught him technique, speedy fingers, because that's what you need in jazz, in modern jazz.
He's my all-time favorite. He taught me respect for the instrument, number one. He always said, if you play it well, it will play well for you. And he taught me a lot of things about touch that I wasn't aware of.
But it was jazz that Oscar's dad played on the family record player. And it was the jazz bug that infected Oscar. Young Oscar's ego grew with his prowess. His father decided it was time to bring his son down a notch or 2. Daniel played a recording that Oscar thought was 2 men playing, but it was only 1. The legendary Art Tatum.
The greatest pianist that I've ever heard, classical or jazz. I feared him at first, it's true. I was frightened to death of him.
So frightened that he almost gave up the piano. Years later, Oscar met Art Tatum, and the 2 would become friends.
He said, I'm having my day, you're next.
At 15, Oscar's older sister Daisy urged him to audition for an amateur radio contest sponsored by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Oscar won the junior division. Soon after, he was performing nationally on CBC radio and amassing fans across Canada. He was still in high school.
Oscar Peterson. Well, he's definitely taken Canada by storm as the greatest thing in Barrel House, Boogie Woogie, and Beat Me Daddy 8 to the bar since Mr. Steinway started making those pianos. I know you'll be glad to welcome back Oscar Peterson.
In his last year of school, Oscar joined the Montreal High Victory Serenaders, along with a young trumpet player who had achieved similar greatness, Maynard Ferguson.
I was thought in those days he was way ahead of me, and whereas I may have won certain things and the French Conservatory of Music in Montreal and all that kind of thing, but Oscar was already just tremendously showing wonderful talent.
During lunch hours, Oscar played the school's baby grand piano, a good way to attract girls. He became known as the guy around campus. But there was another, dare I say, dashing young piano player at the school, vying for the same recognition.
I used to go down and try and ham my way along in my way of playing the piano at recess, and then he'd come and kick me off and he'd play, and then of course the whole school came down to listen to him. I had my elite little group which were pushed aside. And then this mass came in and listened to him. He was already a big star.
At 17, Oscar quit high school to play full-time with another band. His father was not impressed and gave Oscar a stinging ultimatum.
You only let you out of school to be a jazz piano player. Can't do that. He said, if you want to be a jazz piano player, that's one thing he said, if you want me to let you out of school to be one, you have to be not just another one, you have to be the best.
So Oscar signed on with one of the most popular jazz acts in Montreal, the Johnny Holmes Orchestra. He was its only black performer.
The amazing thing is that when he came into our band at 17, he had a technique, I think, every bit equivalent to what he has now. But he was a diamond in the rough. He would know everything in the first chorus.
At Montreal's Ritz-Carlton Hotel, the manager told Johnny Holmes that he would not allow a black musician to perform on his stage.
They were too happy about having an Afro-Canadian in the band. And Johnny said, well, you know, I have him in the band and he's part of the band and that's it. I just figured the hell with that. I'd rather not play the gig. I played it because Johnny wanted me to play it. He insisted. He said, I think this is something you should do. I said, okay.
In 1944, Oscar married his sweetheart, Lily Fraser. Barely past their teens. Together they would go on to have 5 children: Lynn, Sharon, Gay, Oscar Jr., and Norman. But professionally, Oscar grew restless, and after 5 years with the Johnny Holmes Orchestra, decided to take a different path.
Nat Cole personified to me the epitome of being a trio leader. He had what I think was the greatest trio in the world.
I don't know if you ever heard Oscar Peterson sing, but he sounds great and very much reminiscent of we really hear Nat King Cole's influence in that, in his singing.
I'm as happy as a baby boy with another brand new choo-choo. When I marry sweet Lorraine, yes, that'll be the day when I marry sweet Lorraine.
He and I were very close when we saw each other. And we had that agreement, jokingly, you know, he said, I won't play the piano if you won't sing. And I said, yeah, right. My end of the bargain was the easiest.
Montreal during the late 40s was Canada's mecca for jazz, a swinging city of good times that never shut down. An incredible time it was for nightlife, cabaret, and internationally famous singers and comedians.
They'd come to town with different groups and orchestras, and somehow they'd siphon their way into Alberta. I met quite a few people that way that came down to hear me.
At the popular Alberta Lounge, Oscar headlined with his first trio. His talent drew many of the jazz greats playing some of the bigger clubs. For a cat just starting out, this was a tough room.
I knew I was putting every moment that I had, working on, into being a jazz pianist. And from the accolades and the responses, I realized that I was doing something, so I wasn't timid about it.
Also in the audience were musical gunslingers, jazz pianists itching to challenge the young Oscar to a showdown.
You could get smothered very easily if somebody was just an inch above you playing-wise. Well, it was a good educational aspect, too. It was good for the egos.
Oscar smothered all challengers, time and again proving his musical superiority. News of this young Canadian piano sensation soon reached the ear of jazz royalty.
Count Basie was down to hear me one night, which believe it or not, and asked me if I wanted to go to the States. And I remember saying to him, "What do you need me for? You need 2 piano players in the band?" I don't think so.
Although he declined Basie's invitation, the budding star's reputation continued to spread south of the border. The most influential American jazz producer and promoter of the day, Norman Granz, heard the buzz about this rising star. But it was not until a fateful cab ride in 1949 that the stage was set for Oscar and Norman to meet. A meeting that would change both their lives forever.
The cabbie had some music playing, and I assumed that it was a disc that some disc jockey was playing. And I asked him if he knew the station. I'd like to call them and find out who the pianist was with the trio. It was a trio that was playing.
The cab driver was just playing downtown. He said, "Oh, I take and hear him." So they turned around and came back. And he walked into the Alberta Lounge and us started. And he said, "Well, do you know how good you can play?" I said, "I don't gauge it that way. I just play as the best that I can." He said, "Well, why don't you test it out and come to Carnegie Hall?" I said, "Oh, you've got to be crazy." You know, to me, to be frank with you, Carnegie Hall, in my mind, did not smack of jazz musicians when you said Carnegie Hall to me at that time. You know, I was thinking of Minuin and people like that.
On the night of October the 4th, 1949, at New York's Carnegie Hall, Oscar had to admire his idols from afar. He did not have an American work visa and was forced to sit in the audience. After the intermission, Norman called him onto the stage as a surprise guest. The bass player was Ray Brown. The two would become lifelong friends.
So I went out and did the best I could that night. It was great playing with Ray. It's the first time I ever played with him. And I was amazed at the reception. You know, you come out of a city where you're a local pianist that people like and they appreciate you being there and you play well and thank you, and you have a 15-minute radio sustainer. And you look up, all of a sudden you're on the stage at Carnegie Hall and people are standing up doing this and screaming. You know, at the stage door. It's a different life.
The kid from Saint-Henri, who took Carnegie Hall by storm, was now ready to take on the world.
when somebody has that kind of facility and ease, musicians call this chops. You know, when somebody has those mammoth kind of chops, and there's a certain kind of way the music sings.
And he plays with a lot of flash and dash, but that's his style. He puts some kind of spell on you. It's like magic. Boom, boom, boom.
His creative bent was just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And his sensitivity, musicality, when I would hear him play in the clubs some nights, would just be out of sight.
After his debut at Carnegie Hall, 24-year-old Oscar Peterson was red hot. Norman Granz invited him to tour with jazz at the Philharmonic, a legendary show that included such jazz greats as Ray Brown, Buddy Rich, Ella Fitzgerald, Dizzy Gillespie, and Coleman Hawkins.
It was a colony. I mean, it was another little civilization of its own. We used to play tricks on each other in the various trios and quartets. And I remember when Ray was married to Ella, he had been messing with me. I forget what he did to me. Ray was always doing something. He had left his bass at the side of the wings. I went over and turned all this strings down. And Ray came up with the bass from behind her. He started to Love You, Madine. First thing the strings sound like plop, plop. We had him loosen all of them. Now he's trying to play for Ella, and he's trying to tune at the same time, like dum 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 dum, and she's looking back at him like, you know, as soon as we get off, I'll kill you.
Jazz at the Philharmonic took the cool music of the back alley clubs and elevated it to the concert halls of the world. For Oscar, jazz at the Phil was the odyssey of a lifetime and resulted in the formation of one of the greatest jazz trios ever. Oscar Peterson, Herb Ellis, and Ray Brown.
There's intense dedication to the instrument, along with such groove and swing and grease and all the stuff. And then on top of that, you have this. It's not like anything else.
Peterson, Ellis, and Brown performed together for the first time in 1953. Over the next few years, the trio traveled around the world and were recorded extensively, producing dozens of live and studio albums. Outwardly, it appeared that Oscar was living the dream, but that dream came with a cost.
Who do you tell if you go out and have one hell of a concert, and especially if you have some of the names on it that I was traveling with? So you go back to the hotel, who do you tell? You're there with the four walls, it's quiet, you know. Yeah, you have a phone, it's not the same thing as you're not going to phone them every night at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning when there are kids in the house.
We wrote letters to him, and we talked to him on the phone, and that's about all. My mother tried to make up for, you know, for his absence, but we really looked forward to him when he came home. Quality time was really quality time.
And once or twice I missed Christmas that way. And that was really hard. And it made me realize too late that it's not the best thing in the world to have a fair-sized family and be doing what I was doing. It didn't make any sense. Because you can't be there for the offspring when they need you. I don't often speak of my personal life because I don't think it's necessary. And because my life hasn't been exemplary in any way, shape, or form, I don't think. I do think that people perhaps do not realize the effect that a good or bad marriage can have on a performer. If I had my right to live over, and we've heard that phrase before, doing what I've been doing, there's no way I would even consider getting married before I was at least 40. Because I've seen the trouble it took on not just myself, but other players in the jazz field. It's a very difficult thing to be a performer and have, in my case, a wife that understands the true aspect of what you do. You have to almost be cold. You have to say, well, so it's not working, so okay, that's that department. And you have to try and put it aside. No, you can't put it out of your mind, but you try to put it to one side. Because it can block your improvisational ideas.
That wherewithal to put the music first and foremost entails sacrificing time with your family, with your friends and loved ones. And he's been willing to do this so that we'll have the music for all time.
It was not until he met Kelly Green in a Florida restaurant in 1981 that Oscar finally found the balance between family and music that had eluded him for so long.
Well, we almost didn't meet because I didn't want to play this one concert. I was going to cancel it. It was in Florida, and it was at a time when things were still a little dicey in that state for Negroes of any kind.
I was an assistant manager at a restaurant in Sarasota, Florida.
I called him down and said, I think I'm going to leave this guy. I'm not going to do that. He said, why not? I said, I'm not sure about going down there all the time. He said, I think you ought to do it. He said, we've agreed to do it. You can't leave them hanging, which I wouldn't have done.
He came to have dinner at the restaurant, so I got lucky and met him. It was very exciting.
He said, she's really cute. There was an openness about her that I liked. She said she had seen at the beginning, and that was it. And I liked her.
In 1991, at the age of 66, Oscar was once again a father. This time, it was different.
The night that she took her first steps, I'll never forget that. I mean, we were sitting and she was standing next to him by his chair. And I held my arms out to her and she was looking and she came toddling over and it was just so exciting. And he told me that that's the first time he's ever seen one of his children take their first steps.
I'm very proud of what he does, and it feels really amazing to sit, like, rather I'm sitting in the front row or like XXL 16D or something like that, I still feel like, well, this is really amazing. I'm sitting here listening to my dad play with his group, and I'm very proud of all of them because what they do is just completely amazing.
Kelly's busy with Celine and traveling with Dad. She goes with him on every trip, which is great, whereas my mother couldn't, which is really nice because I know, on the road it's really lonely for Dad.
And someone said, so-and-so's in the hotel, getting the names. I said, come on, meet him. I went up to his room, and there, all I knew is I saw the saucer and the candle and the heroin paraphernalia. And he said, you want some of this? And I said, what are you talking about? But I knew immediately when he said that what he was talking about. I said, no, I can't do that.
Charlie Parker, Billie Holiday, John Coltrane, Lester Young, all casualties of addiction. Booze took its toll on Oscar's inner circle. Guitarist Herb Ellis left the trio in 1958 after years of drinking had caught up with him. He had to quit the road to save his life.
When people, not just musicians, people get into those critical situations where they can't climb out, you can't fall all in. It's not really all their fault. They're just weak.
But Oscar had a source of strength, a promise he made to his mother long ago, to come back the same son who had left home.
Certain guys would say, come on, Pete, light up, or have some of this with us. I say, no, I can't do that, man, because it'll kill my mother. I think the instrument should be your needle, and music should be your addiction.
Oscar Peterson was a man who was blessed with great talent, who's acquired tremendous skill, and executed with unlimited authority.
To me, he's like a brother and a friend and one of the greatest that you ever meet.
I've learned an awful lot from him. By the same token, I feel that in my own rights, I have finally arrived, that I am now on the inside.
But at the height of their popularity in 1965, the Peterson trio began to unravel. Drummer Ed Thigpen called it quits. Later that year, bassist Ray Brown also told Oscar he had enough of life on the road.
They had a very special relationship. And 15 years of working together and being like brothers. The things that they knew about each other, truthfully, I think sometimes the men knew more about each other than husbands and wives, you know.
Several versions of the Oscar Peterson trio evolved during the 70s. Even as different members came and went, Oscar remained the consummate performer, completely devoted to his art. But the onslaught of rock and roll and the British invasion had a new generation dancing to a different beat. Jazz was fighting for its audience, fighting for its life. Oscar turned to new challenges. He wrote the score for the movie Silent Partner, starring that same old school chum and darn fine looker from Montreal.
Owen Cullen, I'll be seeing you one of these days. What do you
I love watching Christopher Plummer in high heels.
guess?
That's, you can't get any better than that. You tell him I said so. Even from a composer's standpoint, you know, when I write, I sit down and I write a tune, I write a complete tune. When I finish with that, that's what I want to hear. If you start writing for moviedom, so to speak, they get the scissors out and they cut this little part because it didn't fit that, and you may not recognize your work when it's finished. So I don't have any aspirations that way.
But the small screen beckoned, casting Oscar in a new role as host of his own series and specials. Many of the guests were fellow artists from jazz at the Philharmonic. Oscar continued to record and perform. By the late 80s, he could pick and choose his projects. But 6 decades of performing were taking a toll. Arthritis became a problem. It affected his walking, and he experienced intense pain in his hands. In May of 1993, he suffered a setback that threatened to end his career.
We were in New York. He was playing at the Blue Note. He probably had the stroke Friday or Saturday, and he continued working. I mean, I didn't know. He worked until Sunday night, and we came home on Monday, and he was receiving the Glenn Gould Prize that night, and he went right into Toronto for a rehearsal because it was going to be a radio broadcast, and received the prize that night, but realized he couldn't use his left hand to play. And then it wasn't until we came home that night that finally it was just really obvious.
Mentally, I was in deep trouble. I don't know why, but mentally I didn't. I was not happy to see each dawn. You know. So it's another day, one of those things. What now?
Friend and protege Benny Green had known Oscar for years. He watched as his mentor slipped deeper into depression.
One moment he was talking about actually getting rid of his piano, which was just that was about the saddest image I could ever imagine. Oscar Peterson getting rid of his piano.
After the stroke, I went into a sort of morass. You know? I figured, how the heck would I give this up?
But family and friends refused to let Oscar give up. Dave Young, his former bass player, hounded Oscar to get back to his music.
He said, well, the reason I'm calling you, I want to come out with my bass and want to play some. I said, nah, I don't know. He said, I'm coming out anyway, and he did. So he came out, and I said, David, I don't know if I can come up with this. You know, I don't know if I have the heart for this again. He said, you'll never know until you try. Come on, let's go downstairs and try. And we did. And he said, I'm going to be in your face every day, if that's what it takes.
Oscar endured 2 years of rehabilitation, a slow and painful process made easier by his family.
Kelly and Celine, you know, they were with me through it. And Celine, I used to play games, and she'd make me do everything with my left hand. So I said, Celine, I never did write with my left hand. I can't write with it now. I said, well, you can play this game. So I had to do it every day, you know.
In 1994, Oscar performed in Vienna. It was his first gig after the stroke.
I never can ever forget that night. I came out on the stage, and they must have given me a 5-minute standing ovation. I said to myself, no, what do I follow that with? Harry Carey, what?
I give a guy credit, come out play with one hand, and try to do everything with one hand, and slowly bring him back the other hand. I mean, that's just got to be devastating.
I remember Norman coming back over to my table, and he put his arms around me from behind. I was sitting at the table, and he said, I want you to know I'm very proud of you. I've never been that proud of you. To see you do what you did tonight.
Norman grants have been there for Oscar for 52 years. His death in November of 2001 was devastating.
He was everything to me. I took his passing very hard because he not only brought me to the United States, he became my closest friend. And he also was my manager at one point and guided me through a lot of obstacles that I probably wouldn't have gotten through without him.
I always knew that that would be the hardest, Norman, because they were so close. Sorry. When Norman passed away, all of a sudden there's this void, and Oscar, you know, just calling each other up to kibitz, or if there were things, and I know Oscar still, when he has decisions to make, he stops and thinks, well, what would Norman say if I talked to him about this? Because he always valued Norman's opinion so much.
1 year after the death of Norman Granz, Oscar lost his daughter Shannon to kidney disease.
to be faced with Sharon with her illness and watching her deteriorate, I think that was harder than anything for him.
I admit I failed, because the last time I went to see her, I had to leave. I couldn't take it, you know. And luckily she was asleep, and I just told the other relatives that were there, I said, I have to leave, I can't do this. And I couldn't see her like that. And then she died shortly after that. But Kelly she sat by her bed and held Sharon's head in her hands, you know.
So I think all those things, it's sort of like you get knocked down and then you start to come back up and then you get knocked down again and then, you know, and these blows. And I think, especially, you know, I thought what else could be worse after Norman? But then losing a child it's so different because the relationships are different. In the last 4 years or so, several people have passed away, and he's tried very hard not to sink into depression.
You get over these things because I get over them because I don't remember them leaving. Thank God. I just remember how much they meant in my life.
Since childhood, Oscar Peterson has had a passion for photography. This passion would provide a refuge from the pitfalls and loneliness of the road.
Oscar had an interest in photography long before he knew me. Very early in his life, he had an ability of sensing and seeing a good picture.
He was a great companion on the road for me in later years.
He could have made a good living as a photographer.
And you're talking about staying out of trouble. I couldn't get in trouble, I didn't have the time. Because I was traveling with, by this time I was doing fairly well, so I had a couple of cameras. I was traveling with the darkroom, my own little darkroom.
Oscar is not just a world-class pianist, but a man that has refined the practical joke to an art form.
In the darkroom, which I had in New Toronto in the main studio, Oscar would quite often come down and spend time there just to see how things worked.
And I took this cheese and I put it in the back end of the radiator.
So I went down to the darkroom this one morning, and there was a terrible odor in the darkroom. I just couldn't understand it. I searched through garbage and everything else to try and find out what the cause of it was.
Within inside of a few hours, you know, his wife was saying, "My God," Mara was saying, "What is that smell?"
I finally concluded it had to be the chemistry, and I called Kodak and asked them if they'd send an engineer down here to see what on earth was wrong with the chemistry that I was using, and they came and they agreed there was an odor, but they couldn't find it either.
And he hunted high and low. He thought something had crawled somewhere and died.
I lived with that for, I think, 3 or 4 days.
So I finally, at a safe distance, I called him up and said, "Bob, don't go through all of that. I put some cheese back in the radiator. We used to do all of this foolishness."
Well, his humor, I think, is very important because it comes from love.
His personality, and he's a great sense of humor. He always loves to, you know, crack people up, and I had to laugh so hard at this lunch that I couldn't eat for a minute because he was so funny.
He was always having nice dinner parties, and we'd get invited to them.
I knew he couldn't resist anything that looked like dessert.
And they had a large plate of nice chocolate sweets, which he knew I really liked.
"Why don't you pass the cookies, Pete?" Something. I said, "Yeah, here you go." And don't you know, he reached in and got the exact one I
Took a bite of it and realized something was drastically wrong.
And he bit into this thing, and you couldn't chew it.
Well, I finally manipulated it around and got it out of my mouth to realize it was the cork out of the wine bottle covered in chocolate.
So maybe you're wrong.
I'd like you to sign this if you would.
Kelly. He's very gracious and will talk to everyone, except that each individual doesn't realize how many people that is. And over the course of a career, that's a huge amount of people. And it becomes very difficult.
I don't make friends with people that I don't trust. That's number one. You know, if I trust someone, I figure to myself, there's somebody that I could be a friend of. And I had some very wonderful friends around the world. Friendship to me is not a thing of convenience, it's a thing of truth. We used to have a saying on Jackson the Film, I'll be with you through thick and thin. If it gets too thick, I'm thinning out.
He has such a big heart, a big love. When you actually get to know him, and when you look in his eyes, when you're talking to him, he's really looking.
He's as true a friend as I've ever known. And that's rare. It's a rare, rare commodity in any man.
Oscar in my hometown, Gothenburg, Sweden, when I was 15 with the great Joe Pass and his Peterson on bass, you know. I couldn't dream that I one day should stand on the same stage, you know, so.
I'm playing drums for Oscar Peterson, which makes me proud. I can't tell you how proud that makes me, but I'm still doing what I love to do. It still beats digging the roads, you know.
It's actually very simple to be around Oscar because he says, this is what we do. I'm not saying that it might be the necessarily right thing, but this is what we do, which makes it a lot simpler for everybody. He is an extremely good leader.
With his current quartet, whom he affectionately refers to as the NATO group, Oscar Emanuel Peterson is keeping the groove alive. Although there aren't as many performances these days, each one is like a tonic.
I have a wonderful group, and we're very close.
I settled for an American Beaujolais, right?
To put it cheaply, it's a shot in the arm. It's a big shot in the arm.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.
We don't play for the people. I say this with all due respect. When I go in to play with my group, I'm playing to make it happen, selection to a selection. They play the same way. I play to feed Niels and Martin and Ulf, and they play to feed me. You know, I'm not one that'll play something, look out to the audience and expect to see or hear a reaction. I don't operate on that principle.
His absolute dedication to music has never wavered. It has cost him personally over the years, but it was a sacrifice he was willing to accept.
And Randy. I set levels for my group, and I expect them to live up to it as best they can. Nobody's perfect.
He knows exactly what he wants. He will not accept anything less. And if he doesn't get it from you, bye-bye.
I told the guys, I said, if any night comes that you really don't feel like playing, I don't care if we're standing in the wings, just tell me. You don't have to go out there. Because it's going to be a drag on me and whoever else is out there with you. I said, and the bottom line is, I can play solo piano. I hate to be a drag, you know.
This is a high-pressure job, you know, so I mean, you're playing with the best.
And as long as I can play, I'm going to try and play.
Hi, sweetie pie, how are you?
Keeping the groove alive also means passing on a lifetime of music to another generation.
Is he a member of the union?
It's the greatest kick in life when you have a youngster of this tone that says, I want to play piano. And I said, well, first of all, study some classical. It won't hurt you. Don't let that word scare you off. It's a grounding. It's the foundation.
Oscar has never forgotten the importance of his own musical education. In 1961, he founded the Advanced School of Contemporary Music. The high school dropout also became Chancellor of Toronto's York University. His familiar presence on campus could be rather intimidating.
Oscar scared the crap out of people. He's one of the world's greatest jazz pianists of all times, who many times unannounced would wheel into one of the student jazz workshops, and he's a lovely person, and very warm-hearted and very giving and very supportive. But hey, if you're a kid playing the jazz piano and all of a sudden Oscar Peterson rolls in, what do you think might happen? Well, some broke down and cried.
I tried to impart a certain amount of dignity to what they were doing, and I wanted them to retain that dignity because at one point, jazz musicians were thought to be one step above the lowest level of whatever, you know, and it's something I've tried to eradicate over the years by certain things, doing certain things.
The feeling of his music really embodies all of the great masters who preceded him, many of whom he had an opportunity to actually bond with, to get to know as friends and play great music with.
What he's done for young musicians like myself and Benny Green and musicians that I work with like Jeff Hamilton and John Clayton, and the importance of his artistry is so phenomenal and so huge.
Like blues licks that I played, first time I heard them from Oscar Peterson. And they're still, not just in my repertoire, they're still in my fingers. They've become part of my fingers, you know.
Some people think that when the older generation is gone, nobody will listen to jazz anymore. Well, I don't think that's true. I think good music is good music.
From Santori to Carnegie Hall to Vienna and all the stages in between, for Oscar Peterson, it has always been the music.
I just love playing with the group I'm playing with. And I think I'll keep doing that for a while.